welcome to Handmade Happenings. I'm Rosa. Today I'm making another dress for a reborn baby doll. The last dress I made, I modeled on one of Mom's dolls and it almost didn't get taken off. However, I already had plans for that dress, so I told Mom I would make a dress for her doll using some of the plans and ideas that I didn't get to use on the last dress. Starting with the bodice, I had planned a lot of embroidery for this, so I went ahead and decided to make it white. The pattern I'm using is the bodice from the Sarah Classic Sewing ribbon dress. I cut 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces from white broadcloth. Took half of the pieces and flatlined them to a piece of sheer voile. I did this by basting the pattern pieces onto the voile and then cutting them out again. And these pieces become the outer bodice and the remaining pieces are the lining. I sewed the outer bodice pieces together at the side seams, then turned under and pressed the waist seam at the seam allowance. This is to give a visual of where the stitch line is because I planned a good amount of beads in my design and I didn't want them anywhere near that line because I'd risk breaking a needle. I also did this for the center back seams and then remembered that I didn't actually need to press those. For the embroidery, I used Floche, which is a type of embroidery thread that's kind of finer and softer than the regular embroidery floss that you would find in the store. I get mine from Sarah Classic Sewing and they come in these braids, which are really convenient because they're already sorted into different color schemes. So I pulled 2 pastel braids because they matched the fabric that I had pulled for the skirt, which is a pastel floral print. I chose 4 images to embroider and assigned a color to each of them. Then embroidered them at random points along the front waist, trying to get the look of like a waistband or a sash. And aside from my initial sample pieces, I mostly did this one image at a time. So I started with the daisy. The petals are yellow and made using a lazy daisy stitch. And for the middle of the flower, I used a gold seed bead. The number of petals on each flower depended on how my placement ended. Next was a butterfly. This starts with a line of 4 silver seed beads. I just threaded them all on at once before taking the needle back down to the wrong side of the fabric. Then I stitched a V for the antenna and did little French knots at the end of each one. The wings are done in blue and they are also lazy daisy stitches, this time done with one on top of the other on either side of the body. Next is the rose. These are bullion roses, so they are a bit more 3D. I did some bigger as full roses and then some that are smaller as rose buds. And they were done in 2 different shades of pink just to add some variety. Now there were some gaps in between my different flowers and butterflies, and to fill those in I used purple Floche and did star stitches, basically just anywhere where there was too much space. Then I added some stems and leaves, just randomly weaving through everything using kind of a stem stitch and then a lazy daisy stitch for the leaves. And after looking at this with the skirt fabric, I decided that the embroidery just didn't go far enough up the bodice to look intentional and was getting kind of lost. So I just added another row of the flowers and butterflies, though I did skip the stems and leaves this time. Then I sewed the shoulder seams together and took these pastel, I guess you could say crystal-shaped beads, and spaced them evenly around the front neckline, making sure they were spaced well away from the raw edge and inside the seam allowance. I then decided that it needed something in between that and went back and added seed beads in between each crystal. And to me, the bodice still looked too plain, so I decided to add seed beads all over the bodice, and I just placed them somewhat at random, keeping them kind of spaced closer together at the waist and gradually getting further apart as I got closer to the neckline. Next, I'm sewing the bodice lining pieces together at the side and shoulder seams, then placing the bodice's right sides together, sewing up the center back, around the neckline, and down the other side of the back. And for this, I switched my presser foot to a zipper foot because it let me get closer to the beads without the presser foot getting stuck on them. And clipped the curves and flipped right sides out, and then basted the armholes together. For the sleeves, I used the bell sleeves from the same pattern as the bodice, but with the edge folded back so that it's straight instead of curved. I cut this out of sheer voile and then finished the hem with a rolled edge on my serger. Then added elastic along the opening by placing the elastic on the fabric and sewing over it with a zigzag stitch, and as I sewed over it, I stretched the elastic. Then folded the sleeve in half to sew the underarm seam. Next, gathered and sewed the sleeve into the armhole. I had to take this slow because of how small this armhole is. Normally for something this size, I would have actually attached the sleeves before sewing the side seams so that everything was laying a little more flat. But because of the embroidery, I wasn't able to do that this time. Now for the skirt. This fabric was an impulse buy from Joann's not long before they began closing all their stores. I already used it in a couple of projects, but I had this rectangle left which was just the right size for the skirt, and all I had to do was straighten out the edges with a rotary cutter. Then I folded the top quarter of each side edge over twice and sewed them down for the back opening placket. Then ran 2 gathering threads along the top edge, gathered it to the size of the bodice waist, and sewed it right sides together to the outer bodice, leaving the lining free. I then folded up the hem twice and pressed it in place. And while everything was flat, I went ahead and sewed buttonholes onto one side of the back bodice. But evidently I had my settings wrong and they didn't turn out, so I ended up sewing them again on the other side. I folded the dress in half and sewed the skirt together, starting at the bottom of the placket and going down to the skirt hem. Then I folded the raw edge of the lining under and whip stitched it in place, opened up the buttonholes and attached the buttons to the opposite side of the bodice, and whip stitched the hem. I really enjoyed doing this dress and getting to do all the embroidery and beading that I normally would not do on something this size. And a lot of this was originally planned for the last dress that I did, but I just couldn't get it to work with the design that I had. So I'm glad that I got to do it this time. And now it's time to put it on the doll.